What is the most disturbing thing you've heard said casually? Story 1. I had a new coworker that I was creeped out by the second he started working there. A few months after he started, he came into work complaining he was exhausted. Another coworker asked why. He said his girlfriend's daughter, about 9 years old, had a sleepover the night before. He said they were loud, but then made a face of disgust and said they were jumping around and dancing in their nighties and pajamas, bouncing and giggling with me sitting right there. They knew exactly what they were doing. Women act like little girls are innocent, but they know. Story 2. First teaching job, I was in a meeting with all the American Lit teachers as they were revising the year's curriculum. I asked if there were any books in the year's plans that covered the Black American experience, and if we could squeeze in Frederick Douglass if not. The lead teacher said, "Slavery is too negative. Besides, black people are so physically advanced now because we made them this way." I asked her what she meant, and she clarified, "We made them this way through slavery. It worked out in the end." The other teachers all agreed. Like what she said made sense. That was so long ago, and every time I think about it, it upsets me. Story 3. I took an Uber home from my polling place during election night. There was a full tirade of unhinged things from my driver leading up to it, such as that women shouldn't ever be leaders because God made them to be wives and the Antichrist is coming. But the climax was him saying, and I quote, "I'd vote for Hitler before I'd vote for a woman." He then clarified that he didn't and wasn't going to vote, and that Hitler wasn't a good guy, but at least he was honest. It was so utterly deranged, disturbing, and absurd that it rendered me totally speechless, and trying desperately not to laugh because my brain blue-screened. I had been offering alternative perspectives and rebutting his monologue where possible, but that just totally flattened me. I've seen and heard some crap, but encountering such vitriolic misogyny while trapped in a stranger's car on the highway headed home from voting against Trump is one for the books. In this particular case, I'm glad I'm not a woman, and that people assume I'm a man. I can't imagine how scary it would have been if I happened to be a little different, fearing for my life. Story 4. Not necessarily disturbing, but my 18-year-old adopted daughter totaled her car right after buying it for $8,000 above what it was worth at a shady lot. Her birth mom took her here. I had nothing to do with the purchase. She was driving with no license or insurance. Right after she totaled it, she said, "Well, at least I don't have to pay those payments anymore." She thought because it was totaled, the debt went away. Story 5. A really popular football player at my high school was known for being charismatic, charming, and generally a joy to be around. I was generally introverted and not super social, but even I enjoyed it when he was in the room. One day I overheard him say he killed a kitten, and he was either in an app or a video where there was a meowing noise. Not the kitten, but I assume the meowing reminded him of what he had done. He was laughing about it. I'm pretty sure that dude is going to be in jail one day if he isn't already. I might actually go look him up now. Story 6. When I started college back when I lived in Tennessee, I was hanging out in the cafe with some of the older students I had met in the orientation program. I excused myself to go to the restroom when they told me that, no, I shouldn't use that one. It was dirty because it was the one for, and then he said a racial slur. The one for folks like us was on the other side. It's amazing the crap people will just out and say if they think you're in the group. Suffice it to say, I found better friends elsewhere. Story 7. A brown or reddish, thick-beard, sorumbatico lonely guy in a church in Barcelona, Spain, praying and talking, "If I end someone, the voices are going to stop, things going to get better," over and over again while rocking back and forward on his bench. I used to see him on the commute from my work all the time, always alone, with one exception when I saw him with someone that could be his father. What surprised me? Always looking like he was carrying the world on his back. I got so affected that if I was not making a lot of money in Barcelona and skyrocketing in my job, I would have left the city. I stopped walking back to my house and stopped going to church. I will never forget him. Story 8. Listening to my American grandpa just casually drop horrific things he saw when he fought in World War II at random. Like, you ask him about farm life, and he will drop this on you. "I hate open pastures." I remember one time I saw 2 Sherman tanks get blown to hell, about 100 yards out, and I saw the tank commander jump out on fire only for the Germans to cut him down. Anyway, that's why I hate open fields. Story 9. Knew a bunch of guys in the military, early 2000s, who made it very clear that they joined in order to kill brown people without consequences. But the worst person was a guy in high school who would go around to those roadside memorials that people put up where loved ones died in auto accidents and take stuff from them. He had a wallet full of pictures of dead girls, and he knew all of their names and would talk about them like they were his girlfriends. He also took stuffed animals, but only if they were actually owned by the girls and not just bought for the memorial. Yeah, I met this blonde named Kelly yesterday out on the highway near the bridge. Her stuffed bunny and I are going to have some special time this weekend. He would say that kind of crap all the time, and he always sounded absolutely serious. I guess I considered him a friend, but the kind of friend you never tell where you live. Story 10. I was arguing with a Russian guy who was a U.S. service member for 15 years and supported Russia's war in Ukraine. I pointed out that they were forcing prisoners to go and fight and die in large numbers in death wave attacks. His response was, "What? They're just prisoners." He was attacked relentlessly in chat until he left the server. He mocked Ukrainian deaths and said they staged all the Russian atrocities to make Russia look bad. Story 11. Worked at a convenience store for 4 years in southeastern Kentucky. Almost daily, the rednecks or druggies would threaten me. "Oh, we sell Marlboro $1 more than down the road?" Guess I, personally, deserve to have my skull caved in. I'm a dude with long hair. Suppose that's enough to take me out back and put me down. These are real things that have been said, and there have been many, many things like this over the course of 4 years, all that for $9 per hour. Story 12. Same guy, two things, same conversation. I was talking about hunting with a coworker. Never worked with him before, so we were just chatting while driving to a stop. Delivery drivers. We come upon the subject of hunting. I recently got back into it after 10 years or so. He mentions that he hunts too, but he just likes to shoot the deer. After he shoots them, he just leaves it there and calls his brother, and he may or may not go get it. He wants to see what it's like to shoot a person. I was like, okay man, that's wild, and haven't worked with him since. Story 13. While we were doing a freshman community service project during our first week of college, this one guy tells a funny story about how he and his friends hated this guy in his hometown because he'd yell at kids for playing too close to his property, so they threw rocks at his cat. He also added, laughing, that the old guy died on his porch, and it was a few days before anyone noticed because they thought it was a Halloween decoration. Creepy guy. That was the first sign of his creepiness, but not the last. The worst was when one of my roommates left our bedroom door unlocked one day, and this guy came in and stood there in the middle of the night until I snapped out of my half-asleep daze and yelled at him to leave. Story 14. A friend of mine invited me to a tabletop game night with some friends of his. He warned me that they often have some messed up conversations, but I was not expecting the last time I was in a prison riot. On my first night, I later invited another friend to join the group, and on her first night it was, if you want to take down a 747 from the ground, you do it like this. The group was a very intelligent group of high-level IT professionals with a wide range of interests who just liked spitballing crazy ideas from time to time. It was wild. Story 15. Years ago, a coworker had been overhearing a bunch of us talk about the first season of the podcast, Serial, when it first came out and was a big sensation, and decided to start listening to it himself. One day he comes in and excitedly tells me that he knows all the places they talk about in the show, and the park where the victim was dumped really is dumping ground for bodies, because that's where his brother's body was dumped when he was murdered. He tells me this with a smile on his face, and excited, like he just discovered a story about his favorite childhood friends. Story 16. My ex-wife's grandfather was a captain in the Marines during World War II, Pacific Theater. He was diagnosed with dementia late in life, and before he lost the ability to speak, he became really open about his time in the war. I was all for it, because he had never said anything before, and now I was hearing all of these incredible stories about battles and campaigns I'd only seen in movies. Then one night, when the family had a cookout, we were sitting around watching the sun go down and just talking. He tells one about after the Japanese surrendered and were occupied. He was in charge of a checkpoint and went off on this story. This is paraphrasing, but it went something like this. So we had to take any weapons or banned items that they had. That's where I got my jewelry box. So we asked if it was ornately carved or something, and we're going to ask why that was banned. But he said, "It's an old shoebox where I put all the watches, gold teeth, rings, and jewelry we took from the Japanese. A lot of those women tried to hide their rings and bracelets between their tits or stuffed up their hoo-ahs, but we always found them. A lot of those people didn't know to take out their gold teeth beforehand, but we got them. I have 50 or 60 Japanese watches I'm handing down to the boys when I go, and started laughing madly. He stopped and noticed that everyone around the table was beyond horrified, and you could see a moment of clarity cross his face, and he said, that story was a lot funnier in 1946. So yeah, he was always known as a war hero and the incorruptible patriarch of her family. And he was for all those years after that, but that story, more than anything, showed me how god-awful horrible war is, and what seemingly good people are capable of doing to each other. Story 17 was at a burlesque conference that occurs every year, and they had a little talk show style activity where the host interviewed a guest of honor. This year it was one of the burlesque legends, the name for those who were doing burlesque pre-ADS, and paved the way for everyone else. This woman was known for being wild on and off the stage, so we all knew we were about to hear some great stories. What we didn't expect was for her to casually tell a story about the time in the 70s that she tried to murder her girlfriend with rat poison. She sat there and described the process of making the oatmeal, going as far as to describe the delicious spices she added. The oatmeal was served and eaten, and the only reason her girlfriend didn't die was luck. She went to the hospital, recovered, and didn't press charges. I think she even stayed with this woman for a little while after that. At the end of the story, you could hear a pin drop in this big ballroom, and mouths were literally wide open. The legend just moved on with the interview, never acknowledging how crazy her story was. You can now separate burlesque people into two categories: those who are horrified when they learn the story, and those who chuckle and say, "That's so, insert name." Story 18. I was in the car with my mom, and a lady wearing a hijab was crossing the road. My mom, ugh, look, another one of them. I should just run them over. Die, Muslim, die. My dad, Muslims are taking over the world, and it's just a matter of time before they start forcing you to wear a headscarf and make you pray to Allah. I just love going online and calling them lying pigs. The world is better off without them. I know they're all talk, but I find this really disturbing. I'm hoping I was switched at birth or adopted because I feel repulsed at the idea of sharing genes with these people. Story 19. When Brokeback Mountain first came out, I only saw like the last hour. This was a long time ago. You couldn't just pull it up and stream it. I saw it on cable. Anyways, I go to work. We're outside smoking a cigarette, talking about movies, and I'm like, I finally saw Brokeback. Didn't seem that gay, really. Nothing was too crazy. Not sure about all the fuss. Just two dudes who love each other. I'd be guilty of the same probably. Apparently I missed all the butt stuff and spitting on hands up in the mountains. Story 20. I think a lot of parents can relate to this. But I walked in the side door at home and said to my parents, I think I hurt myself. Yeah, I fell off my bike as a kid, broke my nose, broke my jaw, poured blood, road rash all over my arm, got 2 layers of stitches, and somehow made my teeth and braces all crooked. I was in shock, and the pain didn't set in until we were in the emergency room. I highly do not recommend face planting into a road. You also don't get everyone to sign your cast because it's your face, and you have to go on a liquid diet and have a hockey player nose forever. Story 21. Through work, I met a couple of soldiers who had been deployed in the Middle East. They were pilots and had dropped bombs on civilians. What disturbed me was how casual they were about it. It was just a press of a button. I understand that they compartmentalize that crap, but it was kind of haunting. Tied in with this was a conversation I had with a survivor of the tsunami of 2004. She and her family survived only because her mother had sensed something was wrong and had left the beach just minutes before hell broke loose. The way she described seeing the wave destroy everything was chilling. Story 22. Our next-door neighbor came to our door and asked if he could talk to both of us. We only knew him casually from saying hello here and there when we would see each other outside. He proceeded to tell us very casually that he had angered some gang members, and they had threatened to come over and shoot up his house and family members. He wanted us to know since we lived next door, and as he walked away, he let us know to look out for a red car with black doors. We were both like, what the? Luckily, nothing ever happened, but it still blows my mind how nonchalant he was about it all. Story 23. I ended up in the holding center at Heathrow Airport because I didn't have a return flight on a vacation to the UK. I was surrounded by convicts and refugees. There was nothing to do for the 24 hours I was held there, so I talked to literally everybody. One guy said he is a refugee from Pakistan. He is a highly respected doctor, and he was protesting against his own country for India to own the rights to Kashmir. The government found out, and they went after him to put a bullet in his head, so he quickly fled to London. He is in a limbo stage of they can't let him into the country, but they also can't send him back to his death. So he is just stuck there for the foreseeable future. He was so chill about the whole thing, yet my jaw was literally on the floor while he was talking. Story 24. About 30 years ago, I was living and working in London in a trendy jewelry shop. This very well-dressed guy came in one day with this mountain of a man who looked like he was a bodyguard. The guy asked me out and was persistent when I turned him down. He did leave, but the bodyguard came back and insisted that I should accept. He eventually left as well. I got the impression this guy was a gang member. I started getting phone calls at work after that, where a guy asked for me only for me to hear him jacking off. Workmates had to walk me to the tube station. I was freaked out. Anyway, the disturbing thing, there was a homeless guy at my local tube station that I used to give food and cigarettes to. I usually sat for a chat with him, and he had told me he was homeless, as he was on the run from the police. He had a Northern Irish accent, which may have had something to do with it. I was telling him about this guy at work, and he very kindly offered to put him in the canal for me. I must have looked at him with disbelief because he leaned in close and said, "It's okay. I've done it before." Story 25. I heard a girl talking about her kids. She said, "My son wasn't planned, but my daughter was. I was dating this guy and knew that we'd make a cute kid. So I got pregnant with her. I just don't understand how making a cute kid is the only criteria for creating a human being. If I remember correctly, the guy wasn't on board with it. He may not have even known that her plan was to get pregnant. I just can't imagine someone making such a serious decision so flippantly." Another time, I overheard a lady talking to her friend at the store. She said, "I keep telling those kids if they don't behave, I'm going to drop them off at the fire station." I really hope she was joking. I can't imagine the kind of psychological trauma that is going to do to her poor kids. Also, for those of you who aren't in the US, we have a law here that you can legally and anonymously leave an unwanted baby or child at a fire station where they'll be turned over to children's services to be cared for. This is to prevent people from harming unwanted children, especially newborns, and giving them a viable option to make sure the child is safe. So this woman is essentially telling her kids that if they don't behave, she's going to abandon them and let them go into foster care. Truly disgusting if she's serious. Even if she's not, that's not the kind of thing you should even joke about. I felt so bad for her kids. Story 26. Today I was at a local little liquor store. It also has little sit-down slot machines. I was getting some libations for a nerdy night when I heard this guy drunkenly keep talking about how he has this new gun that'll blow your brains out. He said that over and over. Not only will I never go back to that liquor store, but that man is definitely going to kill someone in this city soon. I didn't look up or make eye contact, and his voice didn't really stand out either, so I'm just as clueless as anyone if it were to happen. But it's crazy how terrified I felt in a 2-minute period. Story 27. We're at a kid's birthday party in a fast food restaurant. Just some family and my uncle-in-law start saying things like, "The Mexicans are ruining this country. They bring in so much crime." And just starts on this rant about illegal immigration in front of his kids and the rest of the family and the whole restaurant at a birthday party. Another time we're at their house and he starts talking about the struggles they had with their second child. So I had her leg up in the air like this and I'm just going at it. While his wife's father, nieces, and both of his own children are right there at the table. He's the type of guy that sidles up to you when you're not looking and gives you the shoulder bump and says, "What's up, stud? You giving it to her tonight? You two are gonna party." About his own niece. Story 28. I spoke my mind on how the reason why kids who grew up in the church leave the church due to the emotional impact they faced with their parents, which is why, for the sake of their mental health, refuse to come back to church or expose their future children to indoctrination practices. And a father in the class agreed with me by saying, "Daddy is one person in the church, but Daddy is another person at home." Which then he vented about his abuse of him being with his mother, and thankfully for him, she's dead, But still, it leads parents of children that their parents are more like a Jekyll and Hyde in terms of behavior and vocal tone of speaking. Story 29. When I was around 16, I was leading a group of scouts in the ages between 6 and 12. There was one 10-year-old boy who was an outsider and didn't really have any friends among other kids in the group. Every week after the meetings, when all the other kids were picked up by their parents, I would walk him to a bus stop because there was no one to pick him up. During these walls, we would always talk a lot since he didn't really have anyone to talk to, and because of this, he would talk to me about everything. That's how I found out that he was living with his grandmother because his father was out of the picture, and his mother was a drug addict with an abusive boyfriend. One day around Christmas, I was writing Christmas wishes with the kids. They all wrote what they wished to find under the Christmas tree, except this boy. He wrote that he wishes his grandma to be healthy. Week after that, when I was walking him to a bus stop, he told me he was taking a different bus. When I asked where he is going, he said to an orphanage because his grandma is in a hospital and there's no one else to take care of him. 2 weeks later, I asked him, "How's his grandma doing?" He replied, "She's dead." The only person who truly loved him was gone. It shattered my heart.